honorable guest, Mr. Khalifa. Yeah, Mr. Khalifa he's a member of Ahliauniversitybh family because in every ceremony we invite him to give a speech. I'll give a small profile about Mr. Khalifa. Mr. Khalifa is what he call his Toastmaster, okay, and as written here, Zurich written money is representing Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, okay, and what you call it? His presentation title is Application of IT in Environmental Protection and Monitoring. And also, he has his profile, he's working as a computer specialist, maintaining data center, networking, communication systems. He's working also on environment, IT projects. So I believe his speech will be value to our symposium. Please welcome with me Mr. Khalifa Ahmed to give a speech.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning in order to give you a brief about what do I do in my daily routine work. My name is Khalifa Ahmed. I work as Senior Computer Specialist in the Supreme Council for Environment. And today we are going to talk about some of the applications, IT applications in the field of environmental monitoring and protection. Just before we start, could you please go back to grade 4? In my case, it is 25 years back. In your case, I believe it's way less than 25 years. And could you remember the definition of environment? Any suggestion from your side? Here is the definition from a biological reference. The simple definition, which I still can remember, which is everything surrounding us, we are interacting with it and affecting directly to us. Environment is everything surrounding us, whether it is a living organism or not, including air, plants, everything, animals, everything surrounding us. It has direct impact to our life, and the human development forced us, or let's say led to multiple environmental challenges, which include the effect of greenhouse gases, environmental pollution, radiation pollution, and so on. How we can counterback these problems, these environmental challenges that we are facing nowadays due to the development of our lifestyle. Number one, and the most important factor, is awareness, establishing awareness within the community. Number two, regulations and laws. In addition to that, we cannot forget the role of the technology and research and development. Moving forward is to, let's say, enhance our industrial field or improve the industry which we are held in our countries. The importance of environmental monitoring. The first step in preserving our environment is environmental monitoring. But before proceed to that, let me talk about some of the applications of IT in the environmental field. Now, general, later on, we are going to talk more specific about certain applications. Around the world, environmental agencies, whether they are part of the public sector or private sectors, they are relying on information technology in order to generate data. How to generate data? By environmental monitoring. In addition to that, we are using this data, which is generated from environmental monitoring systems, in environmental protection. How? By proper planning, taking actions against certain activities, using this data in R&D to develop better solutions, and so on. Therefore, today we are going to focus on three main aspects. The first one is environmental monitoring, the second, environmental control and protection. The third, reducing, or how IT helped us to reduce our carbon footprint and the emission of greenhouse gases. Starting with environmental monitoring. Multiple agencies around the world, they are investing huge amounts in environmental monitoring. Some big organizations, international organizations, they are sponsoring certain projects for the purpose of environmental monitoring. Examples is UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, International Atomic Energy Agency, and World Bank. I was lucky enough to work on some of the projects which are sponsored by these three organizations. And the first application, which we are going to go through during this presentation, is sponsored by International Atomic Energy Agency. Example of systems used in environmental monitoring are radiation monitoring systems, ambient air quality monitoring systems, continuous emissions monitoring systems, and water monitoring systems, or water quality monitoring systems. Do you know the difference between ambient and continuous emission monitoring systems? When we are talking about ambient systems, we are talking about the surrounding air, no matter is the source. But when we are talking about SIMS, we are talking about monitoring specific factories or specific sources of emissions, mostly sensors installed on certain factories. The first application which we are going to go through is the radiation monitoring. Why do we need radiation monitoring? Or first of all, there are two types of radiation monitoring, either gamma dose radiation monitoring or spectroscopic monitoring. The first one notifies us whether there is a, let's say, radiation event, or there is an activity which happened which we should take action regarding that. The second is focusing more on the type of the event that we have, or the type of radiation itself. Applications include national monitoring, emergency contingency plans, monitoring of nuclear power plants, and so on. Also, early alarm systems. I wish that, is it clear for you or not? Otherwise, I'll explain it, because from my side, it's not clear enough. This is an example of radiation monitoring system. Here we have stacks, or radiation monitoring stations, which are connected to an application server. This application server is going to call these stations via internet using the IPs of each station, and each station is going to measure the dose rate, gamma dose rate, and accordingly it's going to transmit it to the application server. In case of incident, any nuclear incident, immediately the level of dose rate will be increased. So immediately it's going to communicate directly with the application server, and the application server will notify users. All the readings are the first step is that all the readings are cleansed and then stored in database. Then users are going to use these data to generate reports or even they can use these data to use it with other types of applications where they can plan for the future industrial, where they can use it for future industrial zoning and so on. In addition to that, we can add let's say an intelligent layer on top of the data that we have, and by that we can get more, I would say, more professional or more smart reports for the decision makers. The same concept is used years back for, The same concept is used years back with ambient monitoring, ambient air quality monitoring. It's almost the same structure. However, when we are talking about ambient monitoring, here we are measuring 4 main factors, which are the most important 4 main components to be measured, which are defined by WHO, World Health Organization, are CO2, carbon dioxide, SOx, sulfur oxides, NOx, nitrogen oxides, and of course particulate matters. Particulate matters are the small particulate in air, غبار. Why do we need to measure these elements? Any idea? I'm talking alone. I need interaction a little bit. Why do we need to measure these elements, particulate matters, for example? I prepared the slide previously for this purpose, but I will not show it now. I prefer to take interaction. Yes, sir. Good. By this, we are getting something called AQI, Air Quality Index, which refers to the quality of surrounding air, how it helps us. Do you know any patient with asthma, for example? We can advise these patients to avoid going out or to avoid getting to certain locations in our country. In addition to that, something very important. Pardon? Prevention and detection. I would say detection first. When we are talking exactly, assume that we have a factory, and that factory came across, let's say, a technical problem. And through that technical problem, that specific factory had to release more gases or emissions than that factory is allowed. Each and every factory in Bahrain, or on majority of countries around the world, has certain standards which should be complied with. But sometimes incidents happen. And one of the methods to monitor these incidents from our side is the ambient air quality systems. In addition to that, as we mentioned earlier, we have SIMS, which are continuous emissions monitoring systems. Now I can go back to the previous slide. The difference, as I mentioned earlier, in ambient, we are monitoring general air. And when we are talking about SIMS, we are talking about specific factories and specific sources, assuming that factory X has 4 stacks. In each and every stack, there will be multiple sensors based on the industry itself, reading these emissions, and we have to make sure that the emissions are according to the standards or on the same levels which are allowed for that specific industry. The main applications, as you mentioned, sir, at the beginning, is the AQI. As you mentioned earlier, sir, is to detect any incident, and we use these in emergency and contingency plans, national monitoring, in addition to that, civil defense, which are very critical for us. Let us go back to the same simple diagram. These are the same stations, are connected via internet to application server, and once we receive the data, number one, or the first step, we cleanse this data because sometimes we receive errors. Example of these errors that we receive, let's assume the value of NOx is -1. Is it possible? No, exactly. -1 or such values are indicating that there is no, or the system was not able to detect this element. So here we have added an intelligent layer which is going to clean some of these data by default. This helped us to reduce even the number of hours consumed by our staff on cleansing these data. However, we have to mention this. Data cleansing, it's a very tough job. It's time consuming, and it is, or let's say it requires good experience in this field. Mainly environmental specialists, or mainly air quality specialists. He's the one who's doing this job. But we are taking some formulas from them in order to develop that specific layer. Moving forward to the control part. Just similar to monitoring systems, the control part is also important, very important. In monitoring, we are generating data. How we are using these data, or what's the purpose of this data collected, in order to help us on the control part, on environmental control, on environmental protection. Even here, we have multiple systems which were adopted. These systems became the core operational systems for almost the majority of environmental agencies around the world, if we are talking about environmental regulatory agencies. Moving forward, also these systems are sponsored by multiple organizations. For example, UNEP. At the moment, I'm working in one of the projects, which is Chemicals Information and Management System. It is sponsored by UNEP. And the purpose of this system is to monitor all the chemicals which are entering Bahrain in proper manner. Currently, it's done, but it's not systematic. This will help us to generate reports better, to generate report faster, to better monitor all the chemicals which are entering our country. In addition to that, World Bank sponsored multiple projects in this field, especially when it comes to stuff related to air quality or environmental planning or even urban planning. For this purpose, I prepared 3 projects which are, or 3 applications which are in use in Bahrain. The first application is RISE. If you go to the website of International Atomic Energy Agency, you will find that one of the countries which are using RISE is Bahrain. Multiple countries around the world, they're using this application. The main purpose of this application is to monitor the whole life cycle of any radioactive source which is entering the country. Accordingly, as you all know, that Bahrain signed multiple agreements which are in compliance with the prevention of the use of nuclear weapons, proper monitoring of radioactive sources, and so on. This system is helping us to monitor the whole life cycle of the source, starting from the importing, when the source imported to Bahrain, until it reached to the industry, how it is used in the industry, and end of life of that specific equipment or device which is containing the radioactive source. May I ask you a question here? Do you have any idea about devices which are using radioactive sources? Very simple. We do not have nuclear weapons in Bahrain, by the way. Okay, so don't tell me nuclear weapons. Yes. No, we are not using nuclear energy. We cannot. We cannot due to the small area of Bahrain. Okay. By the way, Holland, they're doing that. They're buying power from Belgium and Germany. Example is, anybody works in petrochemical industry? The gauges which are used in certain, some of the gauges which are used in petrochemical industries, including Babco, GPIC, and so on, contains radioactive sources. And of course, you will need detector in order to complete the whole measure. Moving forward, that's true that these equipment are small, and the amount of radioactive sources which are used is small also. However, if it is not properly monitored, it may lead to a disaster or a catastrophe. Okay. Do you have a question? Exactly. Once these gauges reached, as I mentioned earlier, this system helps us to monitor these devices or equipment. Once it enters Bahrain, the movement from the import point to the industry, the use, the maintenance of that specific device, and at the end, as you just mentioned now, at the end of life of that specific device, how we are going, or what we are going to do with that specific device. And by the way, here we have two types of radioactive monitoring, which is helping us. Number one is the radioactive monitoring of sources. In addition to that, also we have equipments, for example, X-rays and so on. Also, we keep a track of these devices and so on. This system was sponsored by, yes, ma'am? Okay, very good question. Okay, very good questions. I'll come back to these questions just after finishing the radioactive part. Okay, this system is sponsored by International Atomic Energy Agency, and as I mentioned earlier, Bahrain is one of the countries which are using this. At the moment, we're using version 3.4, which is the latest release, and they are going to release a new release in the, let's say by 2019, mid-2019. If you go to their website, you will see all the countries which are using that. Reverting back to your question, ma'am, which is regarding the air quality monitoring. The first question is regarding the monitoring of air quality within the industry itself, or within the plant itself, you mean? Yes, there are certain standards which factories has to comply with, or let's say industrial entities has to comply with, and these standards are maintained and monitored normally by the environmental team within the organization itself. Individual inspectors go to these entities, sometimes for inspection. Moving forward to the other type of emissions, which is the emission of the industry or the plant itself. Assuming that power stations, they are well known that they are emitting a huge amount of sulfur oxides. Am I right? That's what. Here, there are restrictions on that. And recently, or let's say it's not recently, in 2006, there was a decree which is forcing Supreme Council for Environment to monitor each and every stack in big factories, in addition to that, power plants, and so on. The concept here, which we are talking about, which is SEMS, Continuous Emissions Monitoring Systems. The main purpose why I did not include the diagram of SEMS, it's more complicated than the ambient. But here, mainly, what's happening? Mainly, we place multiple sensors in each and every stack. These sensors are connected to a device called data logger. And this data logger collects all the data from all the stacks within the factory itself or within the plant itself. Then, on periodic basis, it transmits the data over the internet to a centralized monitoring location. In Bahrain, we had the POC, and 2 factories participated on this project. And this project and the POC was completed on 2011. These 2 factories were GPIC and Fulad, I believe they are called now, or Steel. Okay, they used to be called GIIC previously. I was part of that team. As a POC, it works. However, it's going to be deployed in the future for all the factories and industrial facilities in Bahrain. Regarding the ambient monitoring, the diameter of monitoring, it varies actually. It depends on the technology, it depends on multiple aspects, even the geography of the area. However, in Bahrain, mainly we have 5 main points. These 5 main points are distributed over the main residential areas in Bahrain with the highest population. Because our target is to protect, number 1, the citizens in Bahrain. In addition to that, the inputs of this data helps us, in addition, these inputs helps us to generate compliance report with the UN as per UN requirements. In addition, moving forward to proper planning, urban planning, and so on. I hope that I answered the 2 questions that you raised. Moving forward to another application, which I was lucky enough to work on it by hand, which is oil spill modeling and chemical. It's called oil spill modeling and response. And mainly it is used for simulating or modeling any incident which is related to oil spill or chemical release, whether in sea or even in land. Mainly here we are talking about huge amount of data to be processed from multiple sources: meteorological data, sea turbines, historical data, chemical information about the chemical itself, and so on. Adding to that, something more important, which is how to present these data. Here, it's very important to integrate all the results that we are getting from the mathematical formulas which are applied via the application over to be implemented or presented on top of a map. So it is a combination between a modeling and a GIS system. So many applications are available in the market. However, one of the best or mostly widely used is called oil map, which is provided by RPS ASA, and it was used in multiple incidents. I won't say in Bahrain, but outside Bahrain. Here is a screenshot, if you have an idea about it, just to give you a little bit idea about how the information or how we are going to present the data. Moving forward to something more important for us. Oh, sorry. I mentioned, or I spoke already about air quality monitoring, radiation monitoring, regularity monitoring of importation, whether chemicals, radioactive devices, and so on. Meteorological data, that's true, that does not come under the scope of environmental agencies, but it's crucial for us. It's very critical for us to have these data. We spoke about we spoke about multiple types of data from multiple resources. Don't you think that we need to integrate these data together? Or sometimes we need to integrate at least data from two different sources in order to have better view or to take better decision in terms of certain aspect. For example, industrial zoning. We need at least to have data about the ambient reading, SIMS reading. In addition to that, data about the factories or industries which are on that area, which means data from multiple sources. The best solution here is environmental data warehouse, where we can easily store all the data together for better integration and better reporting for decision makers. And here we are not only talking about CEO level or COO level and so on, even for environmental specialists, because they are the ones who are giving the license for big industries to build or to start. Okay, this is an example about systems. We spoke about them previously. Assume that we have multiple sources and we want to put them in centralized environmental data warehouse. We are going to have these data, then these data will come in different standards, different formats. So we need an ETL process in order to put or form these data in unified format. And from that centralized data warehouse, we are going to use these data for reporting, analytics, and even to support our decision makers. Now, we spoke about the monitoring, we spoke about control and protection, but also we have to expand our vision. When we are talking about expanding our vision, how IT can help to reduce our carbon footprint. Okay, I think that I have a question. Yes. Okay, sorry, I did not get your question. You want to say what are the consequences of exceeding the limits or the standards?
And other organizations, I'm just saying, is there a governmental body in Bahrain which seriously enforces these rules on corporations, or it's just your...
I come from that organization, sir. I come from that organization. Yes, there is one governmental body which is Supreme Council for Environment, which is responsible for putting the regulations and making sure that all the entities here in Bahrain are in compliance with these regulations and standards. Ministry of Commerce, they refer back to Supreme Council for Environment. Even now, if you want to have a license for certain commercial, I would say for commercial entity or anything, for certain types of commercial activities, you should get the approval of Supreme Council for Environment. It seems to be that you have a CR or you just renewed that for a CR. Okay. Let us continue to how IT helped us to reduce our carbon footprint. Number one, smart buildings. Why I started with smart buildings? Smart building, or let me share with you a story. Okay. In 2010, I've been to Ministry of of Water and Green Technology in Malaysia. I cannot remember the exact name, but their scope covers water, green technologies, and I believe energy. I'm not sure, 100%. The thing which I really loved about their building is they have extremely good or efficient utilization of power there. Assuming an employee requires to work at late night where it is super dark, the only thing that they have to do is to configure, or let's say input that employee is going to work for additional 3 hours on that specific night. All the lighting will be off except his track to his office, and his office will be on only, rather than opening the whole lighting on that specific floor. Proper utilization of power, or let's say efficient use of power, helps to reduce the amount of power generated by our power plants, which means for a country just like Bahrain, which is relying on natural gas to generate electrical power, it means we are reducing the consumption of natural gas, we are reducing the emission contributed by these power plants. Moving forward to another way, which is online collaboration. Online collaboration helped us to reduce the amount of traveling, which means, number one, we save the fuel, and I believe fuel nowadays is getting more expensive. Everybody's complaining. But no one complained about the emissions that fuel is emitting to the environment. In addition to that, increase the productivity. Moving forward to something more important is reduced, or let's say, helped us to better utilize our timing at the office. Another example, which is remote support, which I daily face it. I'm handling, technically in IT, we are a team of 4 staff, and we are supporting 5 different locations. And these locations, our HQ, which is located in Sif area, Al Areen, which comes under Supreme Council for Environment. Maybe people, they know Al Areen more than Supreme Council for Environment. Arad Bay. In addition to that, we have 2 offices, one in Khalifa Seaport and one in King Fahd Causeway. And another one will be in the future, they are going to open it in the airport. Do you think that it is easy for us to manage all these sites and we are only 4? Remote support helped us to reduce our traveling. In addition to that, helped us to save our time. Moreover, reduce the overtime that we are requesting, so reduce the cost for our organization. Until now, we are talking only about the advantages. We did not talk about the other side of the coin. The disadvantages, which includes increase of our e-waste, increase of the energy consumed, will require us more servers in order to keep track or monitoring. It will require us more storage. It will require us more hardware. So increased energy, increased waste, increased costs. This is the disadvantages, or let's say main disadvantages. How to overcome that? Very simple. It is critical for us to continue protecting our environment. But we cannot, but with minimum, or let's say how to minimize these negative sides or negative impact by very simple adoption, which is the adoption of a green ICT. Have you ever heard about a green ICT? Except Dr. Wasan. Have you ever heard about green computing, green ICT? Okay, I want to hear from the students. What do you know about green ICT? I heard someone said yes. Okay. Yes. Oh. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Mobile is taking from
Solar
systems.
solar
instead of-
system,
yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
But even here in Bahrain, okay,
I mean, there will be an opening for
yes,
branch in Bahrain. Yeah.
they are going to
The
open
availability
a
zones.
new data center here in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Mainly a whole availability zone here in Bahrain. When we're talking about, yes, that's true. One of it is efficient use of electricity or efficient use of power. Mainly, let us put it in very simple definition, which is sustainable, or let's say environmental friendly use of computing resources. This is the shortest and most simple definition of green computing. Aspects of that include efficient use of energy, how to know that that specific device or that specific equipment is efficient in terms of energy. Just check if it is Energy Star or not. Moving forward to another very important aspect. Nowadays, all the organizations, they're using virtualizations. Cloud computing. Why to keep extra hardware in your organization? Just move it to cloud and reduce the load within your organization. Pool of resources. Why to have, let's say, printers for all your stuff? And after 3 years, you will generate a huge amount of e-waste. And e-waste is a big challenge nowadays. So use one centralized printer and let all the staff use it. Moving forward, online collaboration to reduce the emissions or effects of traveling or let's say need to travel in order to have meetings and so on. ROHS or environmental friendly, or let me put it in more general aspect, which is go for environmental friendly devices where they use environmental friendly equipment on that. Examples, the cables. Just make sure that it is ROHS compliant. Some mobile devices and communication devices, just make sure that the ROHS stack is there, and so on. Today, we went through environmental monitoring information systems, environmental control and protection information systems, and some suggestions or some aspects of how IT helped us to reduce the carbon footprint and our contribution on greenhouse gases. IT became the core of environmental agencies around the world. So, there is a huge demand for R&D on this topic, and the future of this is the students themselves. Still, we require more R&D to develop more smarter systems, more systems to help us in the environmental monitoring, in the environmental protection, and so on. This is the message that I wanted to deliver it to you, and hope that you enjoyed this longer presentation. Okay. Thank you very much.